If you look at the Greek magical papyri, it is an entire compendium of cultural appropriation.
Oh, yes. They grabbed everything. If they saw a word of power, they grabbed it and used it.
Right, because who cared, right? Because it was about results.
Today on the Glitch Bottle podcast, we are summoning cultural appropriation and gender issues into the spiritus loci for a closer look with the return of authors and magicians Aaron Leitch and Rufus Opus. Salutations, listeners, and welcome back to Glitch Bottle, the podcast where we uncork the uncommon in magic, mysticism, and the generally misunderstood. I'm Alexander Eth, and today on the podcast, we made the horrible decision, meaning awesome decision, to once again invite authors and magicians Aaron Leitch and Rufus Opus back on the podcast, indeed at the same time. Also, please make sure to check out the first podcast appearance featuring these two magical rabble rousers. It's called Double Trouble on Glitch Bottle. I think you'll love it. Now, this podcast goes in depth into a lot of the hot topics that are swirling around many of the ceremonial magic and evocation-based conversations, specifically in the online forums. And these topics are largely driven by the issues that you, the listeners, were messaging me and asking me to ask our guests for. So, Aaron and Rufus, a little bit about them. They are friends, friendly rivals, at times bitter enemies, but they are also authors and practitioners. And they talk about things like cultural appropriation in magic and what that really means, why we don't see as many female practitioners in the online space as much. Although, as a side note, we have some great guests coming up on the podcast soon who I think you'll really enjoy and who also, by a pure coincidence, happen to be female. So we have some great things coming up for you, so stay tuned for that. In this podcast, though, Aaron and Rufus answer questions about the Golden Dawn and the OTO, and also we go in depth into the Holy Guardian Angel in ways that I never expected. And so, as usual, Josh and Aaron are a magical riot to listen to, and I hope you really enjoy this podcast. And now, to help us uncork the uncommon, I give you Aaron Leitch and Rufus Opus. Aaron and Rufus, thank you both so much for coming back on the podcast today.
Thanks for having us back.
I know last time we started the podcast, Rufus, you were leveling accusations against Aaron about turning you into a newt. Or did you turn him into a newt? Hold on.
No, he actually did turn me into a newt for a period of about 3 days. I got better.
Oh, that's right. That's what I wanted to just confirm. So you got better, so you've never felt the desire to reciprocate the favor, I take it?
No, I choose the high ground. I'm part of the OTO and Thelema, and generally our approach to magic is basically trying to bring people to a higher level rather than turning them into their base natures.
We say that he got better, but what we mean is that he turned back into human form. It didn't actually improve him any.
I would disagree. And by the way, Alexander, I appreciate that wonderful intro and you indicating that Aaron and I are friends, but we are really not friends. I don't want him.
Bitter rivals.
I can't stand him.
I absolutely hate Frauder Rufus Opus.
There's nobody worse on the planet than Aaron Leitch.
Well, I can see the Jupiterian invocation that I did for the successful friendship fostering failed miserably. So this is good.
No, this is as good as it gets between us.
Yep.
It is a respectful hatred.
You both are really active on the online scene, and so when we asked people to share questions, there were so many different people like messaging questions, multiple questions. So I'm really looking forward to getting into that. I guess probably one of the best places to start, and we were talking about this before the interview, is a question that involves both Thelema and the Golden Dawn. So here's a question from Heimdall, who is asking, quote, I would love to hear if the contradictory aspects between Thelema and the Golden Dawn could be reconciled, as in, could somebody incorporate both systems together, even though Thelema holds sacred some names, which the Golden Dawn considers profane. Is it just an issue of different verbiage used to point to the same thing, or are they really totally incompatible? So what do you guys think? Is there some way to salvage both systems in one? Has it already been done? What's the consensus?
I don't know. Who goes first? We flip a coin?
I think that since it's about Thelema, I should go first.
Go ahead.
All right.
Then I'll just tear down everything you say as soon as you're done.
That you can try, but I actually think you're going to have a hard time with that today.
All right.
So I think first of all, the question is, I don't know of any names in Thelema that the Golden Dawn considers profane. So Aaron, could you address that? I mean, is there what do we use? I mean, is on as the name of the sun some kind of profane thing? What do we do that's so anathema to Golden Dawn?
Okay, now see that I was going to say, what do you mean by profane? Because there's profane as in that's a horrible, evil, taboo thing, and then there's profane as in that's just not, which just means not part of the temple.
So what names? I mean, I don't know. What we'd have to know what names he's referring to be able to discuss this. Unless Aaron, you know.
But this is the whole reason I asked. The whole reason I ask what you mean by profane is because, I mean, is there anything in Thelema that I'm aware of that we would consider anathema, or not even anathema, that's the wrong word, that we would consider like taboo, that we consider wrong, inherently wrong some way? I'm not aware of anything of that nature, from our side, from within the Golden Dawn. I'm not aware of that. Now, profane can also mean that it's just not part of the system. It means it's outside. That's the actual original meaning of profane. The way I view Thelema is that Crowley left the Golden Dawn and felt that it was a broken system. And he received from his angels and his spirits his own version of that system. And I don't think, in my opinion, I don't think you can cross the two and blend them and make one system out of it. So in that sense, the Thelemic system, where it does not cross over with the Golden Dawn system, it is profane in that it's outside of our system. Not that there's anything wrong with it, it's just not part of our temple. It's a separate tradition.
And figuring out which names, hopefully they can respond with some comments specifically identifying which names are supposed to be profane. But in my opinion, what Aleister Crowley did was actually bridge that gap that he's talking about and create a system that is based, a good 80-90% on Golden Dawn teachings and practice, and then just incorporating his understanding that he received from, like Aaron said, his angels and the entities that were guiding him. So it's in my opinion, Thelema is the blend of Thelema and Golden Dawn. And if you try to extract Golden Dawn completely from Thelema, you have very little left.
And I do want to add this, since he's specifically talking about divine names and them being profane, what occurs to me is he may be talking about the changes that Crowley made to a lot of things in order to fit his gematria. So, like, for instance, the Egyptian star goddess, Nut, N-U-T, he added an I into that and made it Nuit. So he may actually be referring to those kinds of changes and gematria changes that Crowley made, which would make them technically profane to the Golden Dawn. Again, not part of our tradition. You could not bring those names into our system because our gematria wouldn't fit them. And unless
you're Sam Webster. I mean, he seems to have done pretty well. Sam Webster?
Yeah. And and everything I'm saying here, and I'm glad you brought that up. The open source Order of the Golden Dawn. There was also the Thelemic Order of the Golden Dawn. Even though I'm sitting here saying that I personally don't think they can or should be blended because there are points that just don't cross with each other, like the gematria, that doesn't mean there aren't other people out there who have blended the systems to their own satisfaction.
Yeah. So even within the Ordo Templi Orientis, I have a bishop who is David Shoemaker, and he has a Golden Dawn order that he runs as part of his magical practice, and it's based on stuff that came from his own personal experiences with Israel Regardie, Phyllis Seckler, the correspondence between Regardi and Phyllis Seckler. So I mean, within the thelemic overarching umbrella, there are Thelemites who are practicing and continuing the Golden Dawn tradition, even though, according to our prophet's sacred word, that he destroyed the Golden Dawn.
Right.
So I mean, there are several different methods of bringing this all together. So the Temple of the Silver Star, the International College of Thelema, both of those organizations draw heavily from both Golden Dawn and Aleister Crowley's Thelemic interpretation thereof. They are all founded on the Book of the Law, of course, but it's not uncommon for people who would self-identify as Golden Dawn to adopt Thelemic ideas, and it's not uncommon for Thelemites to adopt a lot of the practices, initiation characteristics of the Golden Dawn into their orders and organizations. So I do think that it's possible to hybridize the things. It's just a matter of if it resonates with the individual person.
Yeah. Plus, there's another option when it gets down to the individual, would be to, rather than hybridize them, would be to practice them separately. For instance, I work the Solomonic system, and I work the traditional Golden Dawn system in the HOGD, and I don't work a Golden Dawnized Solomonic system, and I don't bring the Solomonic. Well, I don't bring much of the Solomonic material into my Golden Dawn work. Some of it has crept over, but I basically practice each one traditionally in its own context.
What you're saying is basically that you suck even at cultural appropriation.
Absolutely.
Oh, gentlemen. We are going to get into cultural appropriation in just a second, but during this conversation, I just heard from the person who asked the question, and I said, which names are you talking about? And they responded, Babylon, as in Hekos, Este, Babyloi.
Those aren't related.
Yeah, not at all.
Yeah.
Okay, then. Well.
Yeah, back to your Greek, brother. Back to your Greek.
2 different words.
We got some questions about cultural appropriation, which we'll get into. We got a question about, why we don't see as many, say, female practitioners on the online forums and authors and stuff like that. But before we get into all of that stuff, while we're talking about the OTO and Golden Dawn and Thelema, we have also, to that point, a historical question from Paul for both of you. And Paul is asking, quote, there was a rumor that Ron L. Hubbard was a member of the OTO and was apparently called Frater H. However, a well-known occultist, Lon M.D., appeared on a show a few years back and denied that Hubbard was ever a member and stated that he was turned down for membership in the OTO by Aleister Crowley himself. There is apparently a document in the OTO archives not only detailing Crowley's choice not to initiate Hubbard, written by Crowley himself, but also stating the reason that Hubbard was, quote, of poor moral character. Most everyone in the occult world knows it was after that. Hubbard then stole Jack Parsons' boat, his wife, and the OTO's money to run off and start Scientology. So Paul's question to both of you is, I was wondering if either Josh or Aaron could confirm that such a document exists. It's rather interesting. And he also says he still has not seen this new AMC miniseries called Strange Angel about Jack Parsons that dives into all of this material. So Rufus, why don't you open that one up, and then Aaron, come on in on that. What do you guys think about the existence of the document and all that?
I'm gonna let Rufus take this one because that's not my jurisdiction at all. So I'm sure he knows a lot more about Parsons than I'll ever know. So
he actually is my partner's big brother, spiritually speaking. So let's go into that a little bit. Okay, so L. Ron Hubbard and Jack Parsons worked together to create a magical child. They found a Scarlet Woman. They did some rituals that involved sex to impregnate the woman with the divine celestial entities that they were trying to manifest. It was specifically Babylon. They worked on it for a while together. with their Scarlet Woman, and eventually Hubbard left, stole Parsons' yacht, and ran off with a bunch of money, and were sailing into the sunset. And Parsons conjured AIM, the demon of the Goetia that sinks ships, and conjured up a storm, and Hubbard and the Scarlet Woman returned to the docks. That's what we know for sure based on documents I've actually seen from Parsons and some stuff that was leaked from Hubbard's diaries that could or could not have been actually accurate. So regarding Crowley's dismissal of Hubbard as a OTO member, I've never seen that document. I have heard about it. The more I've thought about it, the more it sounds familiar, but that doesn't mean that it actually exists. I am not the kind of person that goes through the OTO documentation archives because, as we were talking about before we started the interview, we actually have lives outside of our online and occult interests. So sitting around reading a bunch of letters from Crowley is something that I only do when it actually benefits me directly. Hubbard I do believe he tried to apply through the Agape Lodge. Parsons was running the Agape Lodge at the time. And I do vaguely remember that Crowley said no because of his character flaws.
That dude was so crazy. Crowley went, "Holy shit, man!"
Yeah. So what I did see was a letter from Crowley that said, I'm probably paraphrasing because it's been a while since I've read it, but it said, "Dear God, you're trying to create a moon child," and the rest of his letter was like, "What the fuck is wrong with you people? Please don't do this. This is the stupidest thing you could try to do, and you're going to try to bring Babylon into the world? Seriously? What are you thinking?" And that was Crowley's response to Parsons, and if you ever read Parsons' writings, he was a super big fan of Babylon. He wrote a 4th chapter to the Book of the Law that's entirely devoted to her, and it's beautiful, but at the same time, he was a little crazy at the time. So, you got to take everything with a grain of salt.
We do have a couple of questions from some listeners on a variety of topics when it comes to cultural appropriation and female practitioners and stuff like that. So why don't we start with this whole thing about cultural appropriation? There's been a lot of online forum discussion, or some online forum discussion, about cultural appropriation. So, for example, when you're talking about, you meaning anyone, say, in the West, quote unquote, is talking about traditional African religions and Caribbean practices and things like that, when the person speaking might not be directly from that area, and when it comes to borrowing sources and using things and incorporating them into your own system, there might be some people out there saying, well, wait a second, isn't this cultural appropriation? And hey, you're not from that area and yet you're using all this. I'd just love to get both of your thoughts. And I guess A, is that a fair assessment in terms of the online discussion? And then B, just what are both of your thoughts on this whole thing about, cultural appropriation?
Right, before Aaron jumps in and starts defending himself madly, I would like to actually state that Aaron Leitch is the worst cultural appropriationist on the planet. He has gone out of his way to actually incorporate all of his experiences and studies into his practice. And he should feel bad for that. All right, go ahead, Aaron.
Okay, Aaron, now that you feel completely guilty, as I'm sure Rufus guilted you in.
I guess I'm guilty. I'll tell you what my stance on this is that I think that the conversation has gotten a little out of hand. And it's gotten out of hand because a lot of people involved are not aware of what cultural appropriation actually means. So, for example, if somebody comes onto the scene, and we've seen this 1,000 times over here in America, claiming to be a Native American shaman, and they go out and they're setting up sweat lodges and they're holding Native American ceremonies and they're raking in big bucks doing this, and in reality, they've had no initiations. They have no connection to that culture. They have no right to be claiming that material as their own. That's cultural appropriation. That is absolutely wrong. It's also cultural appropriation if you take something from another culture and pretend that your culture invented it. And that's that's a larger problem that kind of happens that societies do, in general. But what's happening is people are also applying the term cultural appropriation to any time anyone compares something that they're doing to another culture. Anytime somebody learns something useful that happens to come from another culture and it affects their practice or their beliefs. And this is where I think it's going too far. If we limit ourselves, if I as an author am not allowed to talk about other cultures, do you realize how thin Secrets of the Grimoires would have been? Because I spent that entire book illustrating the practices of the Grimoires and then going through culture after culture after culture and showing how other cultures did similar things.
That's where you screwed up.
Yeah, that's where I messed up, was learning from other cultures. Where I came from and when I grew up, learning from other cultures was considered a good thing. In fact, it was only segregationists that felt that cultures should be separated, and I'm not down with that. I'm not down with that segregationist philosophy. And I do think it has gotten seriously out of hand. Take another example. There's a certain someone out there that I'll leave nameless, who goes around pretending that he is a voodoo master and that he actually has all the voodoo tools and the altars and does the voodoo ceremonies, and he's never had any initiation into anything. And yet he's charging big bucks to do these voodoo ceremonies for people and sell them voodoo products. And that, to me, is inexcusable. He has no connection to those spirits, and he does not treat them the way they're supposed to. He doesn't know the protocols. He doesn't know anything that an initiate of that system would know. So it's hurtful as well as disrespectful to the spirits that he's trying to work with. And it's also, very arrogant and very wrong to steal those things from that culture in order to make money off of them. So,
right. And that's the thing, is that he's making money off of it.
Making money, or even if he wasn't, if he was just using it to generate a reputation even. But yeah, it's even worse that he is stealing it and making money off of it. And let me pull an example out of my hat. Me, in my practice, I started out, my first magic book was Don Craig's Modern Magic, and I was going that full Hermetic Golden Dawn kind of route. Obviously, I ended up joining the Golden Dawn, and I still follow that path. But it wasn't until I met someone from another culture, and rather than arguing or being afraid to talk to one another, we spent hours and hours and hours talking. And that person, that man, he's known now as Oshani Lele. He's a Santo, and he introduced me to his tradition. Now, I never took an initiation. He's not my godfather or godbrother. I don't know the mysteries of his tradition other than what little he would tell me as an outsider. But what he did was he introduced me to a whole different worldview than anything I had ever read before had suggested. Don Craig hadn't suggested it. Rigardi, the Ciceros, Crowley, none of these sources, none of these old adepts had presented a universe to me that Oshani Lele did. And it was a universe where spirits really exist. And there are protocols that you have to follow in order to work with them. And that it's not psychology, and your state of mind really doesn't matter, and your intent doesn't matter as much as you think it does. And he introduced me all this stuff. This is all ATR stuff. And he taught me things that he could teach me. That is what unlocked the Grimoires for me. I took everything that he taught me, and it influenced the way I interfaced with the Solomonic Grimoires, and it made the Grimoires make sense. Why they were asking for frog's brains, and why they were asking for why you had to face a certain direction when you did this call, and why, all the things that just didn't seem to make sense from a psychological perspective. And so I allowed my interaction with this other culture to really deeply influence me, and it still does to this day. Mm-hmm. But I'm not performing voodoo ceremonies. I'm not saying, oh, hey, look, I've read a book and here's a ritual to Ashira, so I'm going to come over here and I'm just going to apply that to, Gabriel, and I'll just do this little Ashira ritual to Gabriel. And, that's not what I'm doing at all. I'm performing the rituals from the Key of Solomon and from the Heptameron and from my own tradition. It was my worldview that was changed by my interaction with Oshani Lele.
Obviously, Aaron is a terrible example, but
usually,
and we don't get along. You know, he and I, we have a certain level of enmity. The fact is, if you actually go through what Aaron has written about other cultures and how they've influenced him, he never says anything that indicates that Solomonic magic is ATR. You know, I think if anybody could be accused of that, it would be Jake Stratton-Kent from our Solomonic Yahoo group days. He pointed out the parallels between a lot of the Solomonic approaches and the ATRs, and it was done in a way that was sort of loose and not a lot of use of simile. So, but when you read through Aaron's works, I do think that it's not very fair to Aaron for anybody to say that he is actually appropriating other cultures. I think what he and I have both experienced when we actually started doing magic, and this is something that, like, you know, I've had hundreds of students over the last 6 or 8 years that I have worked with who have conjured angels and demons and spirits of every tradition. And we work within the grimoires that they come from, you know, within the guidelines, and we make adaptations to fill in the gaps because there's no complete grimoire on the planet. You know, but the experience of people who conjure spirits is such that you end up recognizing that there is a methodology of an incarnate human being interacting with incarnate entities that results in a consistent and harmonious way that is reflected in other cultures. When Aaron talks about, you know, having somebody with an ATR background exploding and explaining the entire goetic system or the conjuration system of the Solomonic tradition, it makes sense because every human being in every culture has developed some kind of relationship with the invisible world they live in. The fact that the cultures have shaped and changed and traditionalized certain approaches to that invisible realm doesn't mean that the fundamental human being and the fundamental invisible spirit don't interact in the same way. So when Aaron talks about how, you know, achieving knowledge and conversation with your holy guardian angel is like getting a head spirit, he says like. It's not the same thing, because a head spirit comes from a different culture, and getting knowledge and conversation with your holy guardian angel comes from a different culture. But the fundamental spiritual relationship between you and the invisible realm is at least parallel, if not harmonic, if not the same thing. You know, and saying it's the same thing is, you know, that crosses that bridge to cultural appropriation. But I think Aaron's been pretty clean about all this stuff, honestly, even though I don't like him very much. I mean, the whole thing is that, you know, people don't want to hear you say that we have a relationship between ourselves manifested in a material body and this invisible realm that we share across cultures. Somehow that has become offensive. And I don't understand it. I don't get it. You know, I think that is fundamentally a problem. We aren't going to cross that bridge until we do. But it's something that we need to be thinking about as magicians, as people who are, you know, talking about how magic works. Because the whole thing that we do, whether it's Hermetic or Solomonic or Golden Dawn or Thelemic or, you know, ATR or, you know, Hoodoo, whatever we're doing, we're communicating with the invisible. And that's what we're doing. And we're creating our world around us as a result of our interactions with these beings. all this stuff that Jason Miller teaches about all these Eastern traditions and the whole Hecate thing. Those are great courses, but at the end of the day, every occultist, everybody who conjures something that's invisible and interacts with it to create change in the world around us, we're doing the same thing. So you can't say it's cultural appropriation when it's humans talking to the inhuman. We're one culture when it comes to magic and the occult. And I think this whole thing is just a bunch of bullshit.
I'm going to have to very reluctantly agree with our frogger here on that point. And this is the same point I've made on several occasions, is that if you stand back from any culture, any system, and just think of it zoologically, we are apes living on this big dirt mud ball flying through space, and it is also inhabited by these invisible beings, these spirits. It doesn't matter what part of the planet you come from. It doesn't matter what culture you just happen to be born in. Spirits are a species of being, just like we are a species of being. So the ways of attracting them, communicating with them, making deals with them, getting them to work for and take care of you and actually, give a damn what happens to you, reciprocating by taking care of them, this is universal. It is every culture throughout history, from the earliest pre-tribal shaman playing with sticks in front of his fire all the way up to inside the vault of the Golden Dawn. It's the same thing. Now, what's not the same is each culture. Every spirit is tied to its location. It's tied to its people. It's tied to its culture. It's going to have its own mysteries. It's going to have its own requirements. It's going to have things it likes and dislikes, things that will offend it and drive it away, things that will attract it and make it happy. And every bit of that is specific to its culture and its time and its place and its people. And that is never going to be the same from culture to culture. So this is why I will never say that, for example, the ATR head spirit is the same thing as bonding with the Holy Guardian Angel. Do you mind if I cover this a little bit, if I talk about this whole head spirit controversy for a second?
No, sure. Go ahead, for sure.
All right, because I do want to clarify a couple of things. As I've heard even people that aren't upset about the whole appropriation thing, even I hear them misquoting me on this, okay? I have not said that the Holy Guardian Angel is the head spirit. I have said that the Holy Guardian Angel is a head spirit. And that's a very important distinction that I think a lot of people are missing. And what I mean by that statement is I'm not saying that, hey, learn about how, Ocha works and how the Orisha are put to, the Santo's head and how all that stuff works. And then you can just import all that stuff over here and do the same thing with your Holy Guardian Angel. That's not my point at all. My point is, having learned about the ATR head spirits, and I had never been exposed to that before I, had my long sessions of talking with Oshani Lele. That got me looking at our culture. And guess what? We have head spirits too. And we always have. When Moses...
something else.
When Moses came down from the mountain after 40 days, where did the people say the Shekinah was shining from?
Yeah.
His head. When they paint the saints and they put halos on them, where are the halos surrounding? The head. We have head spirits. When monks take their initiation, what part of their body do they shave? The head. And I've been told by a Russian Orthodox priest, he's passed now, but I was told by him that they shave the top of their head. They'll tell you publicly that it's for humility. We do this for humility. But why that specifically? Why not cut another part of your hair? Why the very top of the crown of your head? He said it was to let in the Holy Spirit. Again, the head. The Holy Guardian Angel is not the head spirit, a.k.a. the ATR head spirit. That is never what I have said. I've simply pointed to the ATRs and say, hey, look, they do their magic by getting a head spirit first. Now look at our culture And lo and behold, our prophets, our saints, our monks, our priests do the same thing. When we call down the guardian angel, the Holy Spirit, the Shekinah, Sophia, however you want to call it, and bond with it and become a priest or a prophet, that force bonds with you in your head, the place of your consciousness, the part of your body that is closest to heaven when you're standing up and walking around. So, like it or not, the ATRs did not originate, nor do they hold a monopoly on head spirits. And just because I'm pointing out that the Holy Guardian Angel, if you perform the Abramelin operation, it tells you to lay on the oratory floor with your head at the altar for several hours on the day that you bond with your angel. Right. Now, one thing I learned from the ATRs is you never, ever, ever place your head next to an altar, because the spirit of that altar will then try to take over your head. And that is exactly what you're doing. And it's written in the book of Abramelin. It's not something I made up. So, yes, the Holy Guardian Angel is a head spirit, but no, I am not in any way saying that it is comparable to an ATR head spirit. In fact, there are very, very vast differences, which I've tried to discuss before, but unfortunately the signal gets lost in the noise quite often. So, but that's what I have to say about that. I'll let you guys move on now.
I was just thinking, like when it comes to the PGM, I use the PGM, but I don't have, as far as I know, ancestors that go back to Alexandria in 100 BC. I mean, is that cultural appropriation? When someone like Dr. Stephen Skinner writes one of the first Western books on feng shui, is that considered cultural appropriation? So I appreciate that, you know what I mean? Because there is that respect always and that deference.
I say, and I've said before, there is no such thing as cultural appropriation in magic. Now, of course, I'm not referring to true appropriation, like I said, stealing rituals, claiming another tradition that's not your own as your own. But when it comes to syncretism, magic has always been syncretic. We wouldn't have the Kabbalah, and I mean the old Hebrew Kabbalah, would not exist if Spain had not been a melting pot of Christian, Jewish, Muslim, and pagan philosophers. They all came together, they all talked shop, no one was yelling at each other for cultural appropriation, and they created something beautiful and powerful that has affected the entirety of Western esotericism to this very day. And if we cut ourselves off from that and start giving into segregationist philosophy, then we will be killing any chance of having a living and continuing occult tradition here in the West, right as we're in the middle of trying to truly revive it once and for all.
I understand what you're saying there, and while I agree 100%, I do totally agree that the magical tradition that we have, the oldest actual grimoire that we have is the Sefer HaRatziel, right? And it's a list of all these archangels of the Jewish tradition that somehow managed to include a bunch of Greek god names in them. Appropriation and what's the word? Syncretism, eclecticism. If you look at the Greek magical papyri, it is an entire compendium of cultural appropriation.
Oh, yes. They grabbed everything. If they saw a word of power, they grabbed it and used it.
Right, because who cared, right? Because it was about results. And if results are your goal, then you're going to tromp all over these made-up borders, these mind games that we have that separate one culture from another. And that's fair. That is our tradition. If you actually want to adopt a magical traditionalist perspective, you're going to become a cultural appropriationist. That's what we do. We mine our knowledge as a human species for better ways to effectively create the world that we experience. And that's what magicians do.
Exactly, magicians. It has nothing to do with being white or Western. Egyptian magicians did it. Babylonian magicians did it. Muslim magicians do it. African magicians. Yeah.
I mean, that whole
European magicians.
The tribe in Africa that had the Dagon thing with the binary star. I mean, basically, it came out of the missionaries' observations of some astrological things that were going on. His astronomy became part of their culture, and they probably ate him. I mean, and that's fine. I would eat him too if I were part of that culture. But the thing is that no matter where we're from, every culture appropriates the technology that we use to convey our desires to the unmanifest. That's what we do. And this cultural appropriation shaming thing, it's ridiculous within the magical community. It's absolutely retarded, in my opinion. It just shows that...
I hoped it would never take hold in our community. I'm very sad to see that even in a small percentage, and I think it is a small percentage, and I think even the small percentage that are shouting the loudest about it right now are mainly using it as a weapon. I don't really think that this is anything that will or even could possibly have any lasting influence on occultism. Because again, like I said, if you're not looking at other cultures, if you're not... this goes all the way back to what we were saying before. Spirits are spirits, Cultures are different, and the spirits' demands within their cultures are different, of course. Their mysteries are different. No one claims to know something that only initiates of a tradition know. But spirits are spirits, and there are right ways and wrong ways to work with them, no matter what spirits they are.
Right,
so,
but also spirits adapt. I mean, it's
well,
not
yeah,
like...
yeah, they do.
Like,
that's the point, too. They adapt to the culture. Yeah, well, exactly. They adapt to their culture, their time, their place. And that's where the differences come in that you shouldn't be appropriating, or at least appropriating in the true sense, stealing.
Well,
but
okay, yeah, I get what you're saying, but I'd like to argue that point. The thing about this whole stealing thing, what it does is it robs the spirits of their ability to adapt to a different culture. The fact is that when I conjure spirits from the Lemegetons Goetia, they've grown since the 15th century. They aren't stupid. They aren't stuck. They aren't imprisoned within that one definition of their abilities.
And don't forget, all of them were appropriated from other cultures, too.
Well, sure, but the fact is that they continue to evolve to adapt to modern times. If you think that a mercurial spirit cannot influence your cell phone reception, you're an idiot. I mean,
regardless of which culture it comes from. Right,
and that's the thing.
See,
that's why we tend to approach these. Wait. Let me actually make this point. We tend to approach these systems as if they were static. They were set in time, and this is what it is. And if I use this ritual to conjure this spirit from this time using these whatevers, it will still be the same spirit, even though, 4 centuries have passed. 6 centuries have passed. 7 centuries have passed. Why do we assume that we can continue to progress as human beings manifest on this world, but the spirits are stuck in the time frame that took a snapshot of their descriptions? It's not. It's not how it really works. Uriel is not stuck in the realm that he was cast in under Agrippa. It's not the same world, and they aren't living within a time frame from that past history. They adapt, they adopt. They are a living system, and until we recognize that magic is a living system, this whole cultural appropriation thing is going to continue to be a stumbling block that people get hung up on and refuse to continue their advancement in magic. I mean... Well,
see, and this is why I make the distinction between what I consider actual cultural appropriation. And when I said stealing, I meant literally stealing. Like...
No, I understood.
Claiming to be a voodoo initiate when you're not. Claiming to be a Native American shaman when you're not. What you're describing, I totally agree with, but that's something that happens not by individuals going out there and just saying, oh, I'm going to make money off of this, and I'm going to sell T-shirts with this symbol on it. It's just something that happens naturally over time. Two cultures meet, they intermingle, and their traditions will intermingle. You'll start seeing, this is how gods used to migrate. Nergal in Babylon very slowly migrated with people through trade and travel until he ended up in Palestine as Resheph. And one of Reshef's epithets was Mikal, like unto God. And guess who Mikal is today? So they grow, they change, they migrate, they move. But it's not appropriation. It's a natural blending. It's a natural sharing between the cultures. And that goes back to the point that I was making when I was making that distinction between actual appropriation that is a bad thing and sharing between cultures, which is a good thing. And like the Kabbalah would not exist without all those different cultures coming together, mystics from those different cultures coming together and being willing to talk. And if we cut ourselves off from that now, if we don't allow ourselves to be influenced by other cultures, then we will stagnate. It will be a fixed tradition. And I think we know what happens whenever you write a tradition down in a book and say, this is it, it's going to be this way forever. The tradition usually kind of rots from the inside and becomes very dangerous. So, I do totally agree that it's necessary for sharing to take place. But that sharing can take place because underneath all of the layers of our culture and the specifics of our mysteries that our specific genus loci demand of us, spirits are still spirits. They're all the same. And if I'm talking to a Muslim or Christian, a rabbi, a pagan, a Wiccan, a Thelemite, a Golden Dawner, it doesn't matter. We can understand each other because spirits are spirits, and we know what it means to work with it. This goes back to what you were saying, Rufus, where we know what it means to interface with the spirit world, whatever culture you come from. And so we do all kind of speak the same language. And it's very beneficial when we do talk shop with one another. And it would be very heartbreaking to see that come to an end for a segregationist philosophy instead.
One of the refreshing, rejuvenating things to see is on the grimoiric, Solomonic, or just magical forums that there are people from Africa talking about different things in the Pentacles of Solomon. There are people from Japan and China that I've seen. There are people from Europe. I mean, like literally almost everywhere you can imagine that people have an interest where, yes, a tradition historically might have originated in one part of the world, for sure. But the interest and the, as you say, the kind of transmutation, the growth, the exchange, the additions that all happened culturally and historically, there's always been, at least from what I've seen, this respect, deference, and also just understanding of, yeah, this tradition came from somewhere, but that tradition itself is a product of the kind of overlapping historical waves of other traditions. I mean, the Key of Solomon is probably one of the best examples. It's like you could trace a line from Alexandria in 100 BC all the way up to the Byzantine Empire, and then all the way into Europe, and then all the way, into the New World, right?
Absolutely. And what's really funny? With all this talk of cultural appropriation, especially from the African traditions, they're very big into psalm magic. You can buy entire books on psalm magic that are just ATR, psalm magic books, and they got all of that from the West. They appropriated the Psalms from the Bible, which is the white man's holy book. So the cultural appropriation, I mean, and I'm really not calling it appropriation, but the cultural sharing has been going on for a very long time, both ways. There was a book that was published by was it Nephilim Press, I think maybe, but it was called Crossed Keys. And that entire book was a collection of authors, both Western and Afro-Caribbean or Latino, who were writing about this whole trend going on right now with the rise of traditional Solomonic magic and how the ATRs have influenced that rise of traditional magic and given us a new perspective that's different from the Golden Dawn and Rigardi and A.E. Waite and Levi perspective we've had for so long, and how our tradition has also in the past influenced theirs, like I said, where they adopted the Psalms, and as we know in Santeria, they adopted the saints and all the trappings of Catholicism because they had to hide their tradition behind Catholicism. So they certainly syncretized a whole lot of stuff. So the back and forth between the Western culture and the African diaspora religions has been going on for a very long time, and why certain people now are getting angry about it is a little confusing to me, quite frankly.
While I agree that it's confusing that people are getting upset about that, Aaron, I really hate to correct you on anything because I really think what you said was just really important, but Cross Keys was just translation of a Pope's approach to doing magic and a very demonic approach to doing magic. And it was done by one of our colleagues. He translated it, and Cross Keys was just two texts. It was not actually a discussion on ATRs.
No, I think it was Frauder MC that did it. Let me just do
I don't think he had anything in there about...
Because it was actually an anthology, because I also included an essay. It's called At the Crossroads, and it was published by Scarlet Imprint.
Right.
I don't know why I confused that in my mind with Cross Keys, but yeah, it's a compilation, and I have an essay in there, and there's ATR essays in there from people in the tradition, and this book was published in this will be interesting to take a look at. The year was 2012. So in 2012, this book was published lauding the interaction that was taking place between the ATR communities and the Solomonic communities. And everyone thought this was the greatest thing in the world. Now it's 2018, and in those few short years, this book could not be written and published today.
Well, it could be.
It could, but it would make a lot of people upset. And it didn't make anyone upset in 2012.
Yeah,
I agree with that. I mean, we should not stop, and we should not censor ourselves as authors or as teachers and give in to like I said, this segregationist philosophy. I mean, we should continue to learn from one another.
There's this huge social crap going on, that we're having to wade through right now. I was thinking about, back, I guess around 26, 27, 28, the whole prosperity gospel of the occult.
That thing.
Yeah. All right. But was it wrong?
The prosperity gospel?
Yeah. Do magic, get rich, have a good life.
You're not talking about the fundamentalist prosperity gospel.
Well, I'm talking about the occult version of it.
Oh.
There was a time when most of us who were into this kind of thing started tapping into Jupiter spirits and actually using the magic to get rich and to improve our lives.
Correct.
And it worked.
And it
worked really well.
Well, see, this is it's funny you brought up prosperity gospel, because that's something I haven't ever gone public with yet, but I'd love to write a blog or soapbox about it one way or another. And here's a good a place as any. What upsets me about the prosperity gospel is that, as damaging and harmful as it is, and I'm talking about the fundamentalist one, send the church your money and God will reward you by giving you more money. I mean, that's complete nonsense. But like the best lies, there is a kernel of truth at the heart of that.
Right. When you do a Jupiter ritual and you actually give a homeless guy $20 at the fucking crossroads when he's got the fucking cardboard sign up that says, anything helps. When you offer him something, Jupiter rewards you. Why?
And it's also true that, and this goes all the way back to the medieval era. Remember, they had a very strong belief that if you were a good person and you were not a sinner and God was happy with you, then you would be rich. To be poor meant there was something wrong with you, that you were bad, that you were a sinner in some way, and you were being punished by God. So this is, this can be such a
same thing as karma. And karma was a social tool that was used to keep the lower class from.
I can sort of see it, But here's where I say that it has the grain of truth, because I see that as total BS and very harmful. But the grain of truth that I find at the heart of it, and I found in my own life, is that if you are right with whatever it is you conceive of to be God or the universe or even yourself, capital S, if you go in and clear out the bad programming in your brain that teachers and family and friends put into you, and television and movies put into you growing up, and you get your, what we say in the Golden Dawn, you get your Malkuth in order, you get your home in order, your life in order, and get right with God and yourself, yeah, you'll start finding success. You'll find your fortune. You'll find your path. What Crowley called the true will. By the way, there's something from Thelema I did adopt. I think Crowley was right about the true will. Your true will, what it is you're supposed to be doing in this universe, you know? And if you are doing what you're supposed to do in the universe, then you have the inertia of the universe working with you, and nothing will be able to stop you. If that means being rich, that means being rich. If not, then it'll mean whatever it needs to mean for you. But being right with the universe and going with that inertia is important if you want to gain any kind of success or fortune. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, and yes, you can use magic to do that. You can use magic to change your station in life. You can use magic to free yourself, basically, of the modern form of slavery that we have, wage slavery and slavery to your emotions and slavery to television commercials and product placements and fashions and political climates like we have in our going on in the world today, which is doing nobody any good. So, yes, you can use magic to improve all of those things.
To that point, we also have a couple questions from Lauren, who is asking, quote, "We all know that women are out there doing this work. Why aren't they speaking, posting, or writing about it as much as men seem to be?" And I think this might be a good chance just to talk about, you know, the makeup of you know, forums, and I don't know, just like, what do you guys think? Because I think all three of us know female practitioners. Obviously, both of you do. In fact, I know, you know, having Carrie on the show, Aaron, was amazing. But when it comes to the forum, I guess what Lauren's asking is there a reason why it seems that even though there are female practitioners, that we're not hearing from them as much? What do you guys think?
Let me jump in first, because then I'm going to let RO talk, because I know there's a lot of stuff going on with the Thelema and the OTO. But from my perspective in the Golden Dawn, I think the women are outnumbering us right now. My temple is the mother temple of the order, and I can tell you there are more women in that order right now. 2 of the 3 chiefs of our temple are women, and there are more women, female members, than there are male. And it's actually kind of been that way for a long time, and it's growing. So, you know, the stereotype that this kind of work, hermetic work, lodge work, is a male thing, that's just not true, and it never really has been for the Golden Dawn. I mean, you've seen the book Women of the Golden Dawn. I mean, they have always been at the heart and soul of this order, and without them, we would not be here. And if we got rid of them all today, like the Masons, we would die within a generation. So having said that, why are they not out there publishing? Why are they not out there in the forums? Because they see the men doing it, and they're not crazy or stupid enough to put themselves out there for that kind of abuse.
Okay.
And my wife, Carrie, has said that to me again and again and again. She says, "I am so happy you're the famous one and not me, because I don't want to have to put up with this bullshit." So that's my take on it, and I really think that's why you don't see the women out there as much.
Yeah, I'd like to take this out of the OTO context, because I do have a lot of things that relate to the OTO and female participation, but I think they actually come under the auspices of a larger umbrella. When Aaron and I and Jason and Scott Michael Stenwick and a few other bloggers were all part of the quote-unquote blogosphere between 2006 and maybe 2008 when I kind of dropped out. I often encouraged my sisters within the OTO and other organizations to post blogs and what consistently happened was that the guys would get a lot of hits on their blog posts, and the women would not. There is a fundamental prejudice against hearing what women have to say. And I hate to say that because I think it's not fair and it shouldn't be true, and I think it's dumb. Some of the greatest things I've experienced in magical practice have been as a result of my interactions with women, specifically my partner, who has taught me so much about actually hearing spirit and understanding what they have to say. But what I've noticed over the years is that regardless of affiliation, of organizational affiliation, women tend to not be interested in creating conflict, where men are more interested in creating conflict to create dialogue. We will argue against a position that somebody has expressed. We will use another person's blog post as a springboard for our own to repudiate, and advance our own causes. Whereas women do not do that. Women are not, I'm speaking generally here, and this is based on a few years worth of experience. I'm not saying this to be rude or in any way insultory, but women aren't interested in starting fights to prove a point. And men are really interested in that. We do that regularly. We assault each other. We challenge each other. We fight for our points of view. We insult one another in ways that either require the person to completely, distance themselves from us completely forever, or actually respond to our challenges in ways that result in dialogue. So my partner, Harper Feist, is a wonderful person. She is our local body master. I have encouraged her to start a blog and, be a man about it. And it failed. She does not want to be a man about it. She is a woman. And what I've learned from working with her and other women in the OTO is that their approach is not to publicly make statements about how things are. It's about fixing things behind the scenes.
Yeah, well, basically my experience has been the same, because in my order, and I've been there now over 20 years, and it's been pretty consistent. The guys are the ones that are out there online fighting and insulting each other and getting in lawsuits and all the other stuff that they get into. And the women are quietly doing the work. That's what they came to do, and that's what they're doing. And that's why they get ahead, and why we're out there banging our heads against the walls. And I've seen this time and again. They just do the work. And it's really what you're supposed to do. I mean, they're doing it right.
Well, I don't know necessarily if they're doing it right, because right now we're dealing with the whole Me Too movement. And this is a transitionary point in our history where women are actually coming out publicly and expressing that they have to deal with bullshit.
Every day of their lives.
Huh?
I said, yeah, every day of their lives.
Right, and it's not something that should be ignored. The trials that women face are completely different than the trials that men face, regardless of your culture, your race, your whatever. It's completely different, and the more I hear about it from my female friends and partners and whatever, it's not the same as what we experience as men. And honestly, guys, we have a hard time appreciating what it's like to be a woman and be into the occult and into the mysteries and the female mysteries are something that we as men are always like, yes, let us get into this and share the female mysteries with the masses. And yet, we don't, we're the projectors, we're the megaphones, but they're the voice, and that's something that is something we don't really get, I think, in general. In the OTO over the last 10 years, more and more local bodies have been led by women, and as the local bodies are led by women, the basic population has grown. Every lodge, oasis, or camp that is led by one of the women is showing growth. It's showing, I don't know how to put it, but they don't talk publicly about their issues. And it doesn't mean they aren't having issues. I think that I post a lot about women's issues because women don't post about it. I don't think it's my job to do that. I think it's actually women's jobs to do that. But they don't. And their approach to things is to go under the covers and talk to each other. And that's how they solve things. Mm-hmm. And then they come out from under the covers and they say, okay, this is how we're going to do things. But they go behind the scenes and they talk about things rather than doing things publicly. And I don't want to say that there's like a masculine and a feminine approach to this stuff and that one is better than the other. I definitely don't think that's true. But I think that as men, we tend to fight. And as women, they tend to talk. And it's different. And I don't know exactly, if there's a better or a worse, or if we should, go back to those masculine, feminine genres and say, okay, women act this way and men act this way. I don't think that's true necessarily, but in general, what I've seen is that women don't want to publicly confront an issue, whereas men are willing to publicly confront an issue and take the flack.
Is it the case, I guess, that if on the forums, for example, there wasn't a lot of this, just kind of posturing and kind of overly, well, this is my point, this is what I think, and so there. And then if that was toned down a little bit, that you might get some more of that participation? Or do you think that it's just kind of an inherent kind of thing that's just been going on forever, and like guys will continue to be loudmouth, posturing, overly masculine fools forever, basically?
Well, I do think that men are going to continue to be loudmouth, posturing idiots forever. But I do think, honestly, if somehow, society just changed and men could calm it down and be a little more civilized, I do think you would see more participation from women. That doesn't really address the larger issue Rufus talked about, where like females get less blog post hits, and I mean that's a systemic thing that goes really deep, and that's very unfortunate. I'd love to see that change. But just as far as participation in the forums go, a willingness to actually put themselves out there more, I guarantee you, if things were more civilized, they would be more willing to go out there and talk and discuss things. They'd like to. But, I mean, who wants to go on? I mean, they don't want to go out there and just be shouted down,
And literally shit on.
Exactly. They understand you don't cast pearls before swine, and guess what? We're the swine, guys.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why they withhold their beneficence. I mean, women have so much to offer. Within the OTO, for example, I mean, the women are doing so much work to create an environment that is receptive and useful to actually accomplish our goals. And the only goal of the OTO is to tell everybody that do without will should be the whole law. That is our only goal. That's all we exist to do, is to tell people that fundamental fact. And it's the women that are making it possible to create an environment where that message can be communicated. Because guys want to sit there and argue about Kabbalah or, who should be leading the lodge or whatever. It's so much bullshit between men. And, I mean, honestly, I don't want to be a woman. I think that it would suck to be a woman based on what I've seen my partner experience. I don't want to deal with that crap. They have 90% of their time is spent, getting rid of sexual advances or not taking on challenges or ducking and hiding for a moment so that we can get through this moment, or giving somebody some time to deal with their issues. And that's like their approach to things. I think it's cultural. I think it's indoctrination. I think a lot of it has to do with what they were programmed to do as a woman in our society. But at the same time, women do some things really well and some things really poorly. And this online argument that Aaron and I have, for example, I don't know any women in my group of really fabulous occult magicians who are doing that kind of thing with another woman.
I could just imagine.
I mean, right? Can you imagine, like, Carrie and Harper going at it? No. Neither one of them are into that kind of thing. The whole thing that you and I do, Aaron, is a pissing contest. It's for fun, and it's also for, to make sure that everybody knows we hate each other.
Hey, but don't forget, though, I mean, even though we're talking in generalizations here, that the women can play, too. I mean, Carrie's having a hell of a lot of fun trolling you right now.
Well, and she's really good at that. But Harper also trolls me all the time. I mean, they don't make posts challenging the other person. Like, I'll go out and say, Aaron Leitch is a complete douchebag for blah, blah, blah. And Aaron will go out and be like, Rufus Opus is a complete douchebag for blah, blah, blah. And that's how we do things. We throw down the gauntlet. But women don't throw down the gauntlet. They're like, oh, look, there's a fight. Let's participate. They don't start shit. But they end shit. They end shit really well.
We do have, to that point, another question from Lauren, who is also asking, quote, we all know that the great work involves service once you get your own life together, as was just mentioned, getting your Malkuth together, so to speak. So Lauren's asking, to heal the sick, and that gratis has been a key on my own path, meaning Lauren's path. So Lauren's saying it'd be really cool to hear both of your thoughts about healing and service and what role these play in personal work and in magical organizations. Because to Lauren, she says that this part seems very understated. And so can both of you kind of just talk about when it comes to service in the great work?
I've been at this almost 30 years now, and I started when I was 15. And I would say the greatest majority of that time was working on myself and, going up through the grades of my order, learning the magic, building relationships with the spirits and the archangels. And it wasn't until I started Doc Solomon's that I feel that I really and truly started to tap into what this magic is really all about. It even says that in the book of Abramelin, you go through the ritual, you get your guardian angel, you get your familiar spirits. Now you have access to all of this magical power. And if you do not use it to help others, it will leave you. I can kind of see what they're saying. Now, I'm not knocking people who have taken on, the work to study for their own benefit and they're doing it quietly. That's fine. But what I'm saying is that for myself, and especially with the Solomonic material and knowing how the Solomonic material was originally intended to serve a community. A Solomonic magician didn't just do what he did in private. He actually sold his services. He did divinations. He found lost objects. He did love spells for people. He helped people win court cases, all that stuff. And it wasn't until I started applying the magic in that way that it really, to me, unlocked. And now I have all of these altars to these archangels who live in my house now. And let me tell you something, when you set up an altar and start working that altar to an entity, you begin learning all sorts of things from them that were never in a book. Rufus even talked about it. You work with these entities and, they start telling you things and teaching you things, and those things can contradict what the books say. Those things can contradict what the tradition says. And it's when you start learning from them and applying what they tell you that it becomes a living tradition.
Yeah.
So I have these altars and I have these angels teaching me, and they're teaching me how to help other people. And applying it in that way has just unlocked a whole facet. It's like renting a hotel room and living in the sitting room of that hotel room, and it's not until you open the doors behind that sitting room that you realized you had this whole 4-bedroom suite available to you, and you've been living in the sitting room all this time. And once those doors open, it has just amazed me the depth that this system has really reached for me in my practice and in the way I've helped others. I'm going to give you a little anecdote here, because especially with all the controversy lately, this is something that really touched me deeply. Right in the middle of all this controversy, and you've got people that are angry at me for at least perceived cultural appropriation, and I think they're incorrect. But I got a message from a client of ours. He's bought several things from the shop. He's gotten readings from Carrie. He's had me do candle lightings for him. He could barely type. I had to actually kind of figure out what he was trying to say. And what he was trying to tell me was that he was in the hospital and his brain was bleeding. And this man in that condition got a hold of his phone. He could barely type on that phone. And he contacted me for help. And I immediately, you probably saw recently I posted a Raphael candle offering, even though it's not Wednesday, the moon's waning. I did it in an emergency for him. And I posted his name, which I usually don't do because I wanted everyone to send their thoughts and prayers for him. And I did that for him. I sent him that picture. I sent him what the tarot card said. Raphael told him, you are going to recover, but it's not going to be easy. And I was able to give him back that hope. And by the way, the candle offering I did was free of charge, of course. And he sent back, as well as he could, a thanks and a selfie of himself in the hospital. But this interaction that I've had with this person, from being just a client to now being someone who is in an absolute desperate situation, maybe not even knowing whether he was going to live until the next day, and he needed help. And I was able to be there as an ordained priest and as a practitioner of my system. I was able to be there for him in that time. And I really don't, I cannot imagine going through my entire life calling myself a Solomonic magician and not having experienced that kind of thing with him and with other clients.
Yeah.
So you have to serve. You have to serve your community. That's why the spirits are teaching you the secrets and the mysteries in the first place, because they want you to help your neighbor and your friends and your community and those who need your help. So that's my take on it as far as service goes.
Yeah, I can't agree more, actually. I think that every initiation you receive, whether it's within an organization or on your personal practice as you go through the spheres of the planets or whatever, everything you receive from those experiences is immediately transferable horizontally to your community. We are here to help other people, and the higher you get, the more you actually find yourself serving. It directly is reversed. The more power you have to affect things, the more opportunities you get to serve others.
Yeah, or you'll be called on to use those powers to affect things. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
And I don't want, I've talked about this with people before, and they mistake what I'm saying for, hey, if you want to be a real wizard, you got to go set up a shop and sell stuff. That's not what I'm saying. I'm not saying you have to become a tarot diviner and start taking on clients. You could be doing this completely for yourself quietly, and no one in the world but your circle of friends knows you do it. But knowing that you do it, you can be guaranteed that someone in that circle of friends is going to hit a hard point in their life. And this can be someone who's a total atheist and has thought for 10, 20 years that what you do is complete bunk and nonsense and it's just a little game you play. But as soon as they hit something really hard in their life that truly frightens them, they're going to come to you. And if you've been doing the work, then you're going to have more wisdom and more knowledge. I don't even mean that you have to do a ritual or a divination for them. You can just talk to them. You'll have insight and you'll have experience that can benefit them, and that will happen. I mean, I don't know anyone, even people who swear that they'll never go public and they only do this for themselves, they still have friends and family member that they affect, help, influence in some way that they wouldn't have if they weren't doing this work. And that's what I'm saying. It's not about owning a business. It's not about going out and publishing books and being a big loudmouth idiot like, me and this guy here. But serving your community, whatever that is. If it's just 3 roommates that live in your house, or if it's the entire world, whatever your community is, you will have to serve it, or the spirits aren't going to waste their time on you.
Rufus and Aaron, to that point, Lauren said that in her question that it seems really understated. I mean, is there any, aside from just living your example every day, do you think that aspect of service is emphasized enough in the magical spheres? No,
there's this stereotype of, if you're an occultist, you're living in a basement somewhere chanting rituals by yourself, and no one on the outside should ever know. And that's not, this is something that I'm trying to change. And once again, this is ATR influence that has done this to me. I watched the ATR communities. I watched them. They serve their communities. People come to them in times of need, and they employ their spirits, and it works, and it's powerful. And I looked at the West, and we don't do that. Again, that stereotype of just going off somewhere to a vault or a sealed chamber or your mom's basement, or however you want to cast, however you look at occultism. But it's this stereotype of doing it alone. And I've wanted to see that change. We should have our own Santos. We should have our own operators that know how to interact with the archangels and the genus loci of our tradition and our culture. People who are Catholic come to me. They don't go to, another, like a Wiccan, or they don't go to a conjurer. They come to me because they're Catholic and they want the archangels' help. So I'm kind of serving this particular community, not just Catholic. I'm using that as an example. But people who want archangel help come to me, and people who want other spirits' help go to other providers. It's having that community come to you. And I wanted to see that come back into our culture. I wanted to see our shamans return, after a 5, 6, 7, 800 year break.
It's quite a break.
Yes.
Rufus, do you kind of feel the same, that it's just not emphasized enough in terms of the service aspect? And if so, what would you want to change to make it more emphasized?
Yeah, honestly, I think that the service aspect of what we do with the great work it's not talked about a lot. But I don't think that anybody who accomplishes any part of the great work ever escapes that service aspect. So I don't think it needs to be emphasized more. I think it should be acknowledged and maybe talked about a little more. I mean, it might be nice to have some conversations on that. I think that everybody who does the work finds themselves serving their brothers and sisters every day. And it's not something that we can actually, excuse ourselves from. I don't go a week without doing a ritual for somebody else. It's not something that is just people who know who I am or whatever. It's just people I see who are in trouble. And I'm like, okay, well, I have all these altars set up for all these spirits, and it's really simple to tap the one that will be more useful for them in their current situation. I think service comes naturally as a result of the great work. That's probably the key indicator of where you're at in your path. It's super easy to say I'm 5 equals 6 or 6 equals 5 or whatever, whatever degree you want to say you're at. But in real life, it always manifests in service to others. Whether it's just helping somebody out through, moving or doing a ritual on their behalf or, just lighting a candle on occasion. The Spirit moves you to do things for people as you see that they have need. And I kind of think that's basically what we do this whole great work thing for, is to learn how to help other people have a better life. And sure, there's all the personal joys and riches that come from it, but that's not why we do this. The reason we do this stuff is to actually make the world a better place for other people so that they can have a good life. Because when they have a good life, they make other people have a good life. It's that whole that stupid pay it forward thing, It really is how it works. When you do this stuff, you can't help but make other people have a better experience.
This is good because now I get to disagree with him on a couple of points. Finally.
Go for it, Aaron.
Now, I do agree that, if you're doing the great work, it should naturally lead toward helping others in one way or another. But I do disagree that on 2 points. Number one, I do think it should be stressed more. I don't think it's just something that'll naturally happen. It kind of is, but I still think it should be stressed more in our literature. Like I mentioned, the Book of Abramelin says, if you do not use the magic to help your neighbor, it'll leave you. But that's not just one offhanded comment. It actually stresses again and again, and even says, this is the most important point. If you miss this, you will screw up the whole thing. So I think it is worth stressing in our literature. Secrets of the Grimoires, I never mentioned it even once. And quite frankly, there should have been an entire chapter in there on applying the magic to serve others. Even if it is a natural product of the great work, we should be telling students that, hey, the natural product of the great work is you will need to serve others. And I don't know if I agree with that's why we're all here, because I think a lot of people get involved in magic. I would say most people get involved in magic not to make the world better for others, but to make the world better for themselves.
Okay, yeah, sure.
There's something wrong with your life. There's something missing in your life. You want to take control of your life. You don't want to be a slave. You want to be free. And, like in Thelema, you want to be a king. And you're trying to grab control.
Blah.
Yes. But having said that, once you do this work and gain that, once you have got your Malkuth together, and you've achieved what you set out for, what motivated you in the first place to start your study and practice of magic, that's when I think all of what you said kicks in, that it should naturally lead to you helping those around you, because you achieved what you set out to do with it. Now you need to spread it around a little.
Well, yeah, but at the same time, what I'm saying by it's a natural process is that all of a sudden you find yourself in a position to help other people, and for some reason you want to. And the whole thing about being a king is that, the king is responsible for everybody who is in the kingdom. He is she is the person, king or queen, whatever, that is responsible for making sure that things happen in a good way that is useful to the community at large, to the individuals in specific, but also, your own personal advancement. You know, I mean, a king can't do shit without taxes. If the people aren't making enough money to get taxes, then, you know, it's a shitty kingdom. You know, you're going to end up with Robin Hood. The whole thing about being a king is about taking on the responsibility of ensuring that the lowest peasant can fucking read. You know? That's actually what is most beneficial to yourself. And that's the reason that as magicians achieve the great work, as they progress in the great work, and it's always a progression, nobody ever finishes, you know, but as you progress in that thing, you're always finding yourself serving others more and more, you know, until, you know, you get to the point where you're like, holy crap, actually, everything that I get that's good out of my life comes from helping other people have good experiences. It's not rocket science, except for you, Aaron. I do try to make you have bad experiences. I'm not very good at it, but
we do have a few questions from Dean, who wanted to ask about a topic that you both touched on a little bit ago, which is the HGA, the Holy Guardian Angel. And Dean is asking, he's got two questions. He says, number one, does every human being indeed have a guardian angel? And if yes, then why are only a few people in the world coming into contact with their HGA? So that's the first question.
First of all, yes, everyone has several guardian angels. Okay? You've got the angel of your nativity, who's bound to the stars. You've got angels who rule every aspect of your birth chart. You've got angels who will just make friends with you, you know, your patrons, those who are friendly with you. And those are also guardians. And your holy guardian angel, when we're talking specifically about the Book of Abramelin and that tradition, the holy guardian angel, and I get in trouble for this, so give me a second to define my terms here. The holy guardian angel is what I term as transcendent. Well, I don't term it as that. The holy guardian angel is transcendent. But I get in trouble for using that word because people think transcendent means good, better. That the holy guardian angel being transcendent over other angels means that he's better and more powerful. And the thing is, transcendent is not a value judgment. It's a cosmology. It's a statement of cosmology. The Book of Abramelin is essentially a Jewish Gnostic text. I don't know if it's a Gnostic text parading as a Jewish one. I actually don't think so. I think the author really was Jewish, but we're talking about a man who was living out in the deserts of Egypt, right down the street from Nag Hammadi. Arakia is right down it's relatively very close to Nag Hammadi, right out there where all the Gnostics were doing their thing. And the cosmology in the Book of Abramelin is Gnostic. And the Gnostics were Platonists, and then later Neoplatonists. And in the Platonic cosmology, you've got the underworld, the earth, and the celestial realm, pretty much like you see in most cosmologies around the world. But then they added the realm of archetypes on top of it. You remember the allegory of the cave? Plato said that all of reality, everything that we see, is just a reflection, a shadow that's being cast by something. And we're not seeing that something. And what that something was termed archetypes. It was the world of archetypes. Everything in reality is a reflection of something that exists purely in the mind of God as a divine archetype. It's outside of all of created reality. It's on the other side of the great barrier of the fixed stars. And that realm, the Gnostics called the pleroma, and that is the transcendent realm. It's not the better realm. It's not the goodlier realm. It's not the my religion is better than yours realm. It's just a statement of this particular entity comes from the other side of the fixed stars. Now, everyone does have a holy guardian angel up there in the pleroma. And the reason that most people never communicate with it is because it is up there in the pleroma. And it takes a lot of effort to reach out to it and connect with it. You don't have to do it through Abramelin. You can just use prayer and invocation, say your prayers every night, and ask for your guardian angel to talk to you, meditate, and eventually you will establish communication. But to actually go the whole route, the whole bonding, calling the angel all the way down here to the incarnate and physical and elemental realm and bonding with it permanently, that takes a lot of effort, and there are very few people who do it. Now, a lot more people are starting to do it. I have a whole class of students right now that, as we speak, they shouldn't be listening to this because they're actually going into their third phase of Abramelin here pretty soon. Those who are doing the 6-month version anyway. So it's becoming a little more prevalent. There are more people willing to try it now. But for a very long time, Abramelin and the Holy Guardian Angel were so overhyped. People thought it was only something you could try if you were the greatest master adept of master adepts and you had already done every other ritual and every book known to man, and then maybe you could try Abramelin. But that's not really what that book is. That's not how that book was intended or how that system is intended. So those who do have the courage to undertake that system, that ritual, it is difficult. A lot more difficult than people think. I've even had people drop out of the class because they said, geez, I thought this was simple. I thought it was just an evocation, and it's not. It's a whole life. It's like joining a new religion. Starting that new life, undertaking that ordeal and that ritual is difficult, and you're going to have fewer people who do that. As opposed to, let's say, contacting the angel of your nativity or one of the other guardian angels that I mentioned. Those are a lot easier to contact, because they're on this side of the Great Barrier. They are in the elemental realm. They're in the 7 heavens. They're here on Earth, or they're in the underworld. So it is not as difficult to make that contact and actually call them down to where we are. With the Holy Guardian Angel, you are dealing with something directly from the mind of God. It is synonymous with the Holy Spirit, with the Shekinah, with Sophia, with the Christos, all of these Gnostic and very transcendent and outside of nature concepts. That is what the guardian angel represents. So it is your own little personal spark of the Spiritus Sanctus, of the Christos itself, that comes down into this realm, just like Sophia fell into this realm and became incarnate in order to suffer with us. And that is exactly what your guardian angel is doing. You are calling down the Shekinah and bonding with it. It is becoming incarnate in you in order to teach you and guide you and suffer with you and lead you back home again. It's not an easy process.
No. Rufus, to that point, to Aaron's point, how do you see the process when it comes to the HGA and that kind of development? You know, because Aaron was mentioning, I mean, just it's a multifaceted approach. It's clearly multidimensional in many ways, just outside of space-time in general. But how do you see that whole process unfolding when it comes to the importance of the HGA?
Oh, sure. One of those easy questions.
Yeah, I mean, you know, totally not a loaded question at all.
Just sum it all up for us.
All right, so Aaron, I would ask you, what does it mean when you say that the Holy Guardian Angel is to lead us back home?
Well, once again, that goes back to my saying that it is essentially a Gnostic cosmology that the Book of Abramelin is presenting. So, from that Gnostic perspective, we are Gnostics. We are the ones who are awake. We are the ones who know that we carry a spark of divinity within us, and we are attempting to return back to the pleroma, back to that high archetypal realm, where in the Gnostic cosmology, that's where we all descend from. And eventually, we're all supposed to return there again.
Okay, so do we exist there right now?
In the pleroma? No, we exist on this side of the Great Barrier, in the elemental realm.
And there's no part of us that's also in the pleroma.
Well, I mean, that's being a little simplistic, because you can follow yourself all the way up. You know, they talk about your higher and divine genius, which is basically you, but in heaven. You know, so, but the guardian angel is not a part of you. It's not your higher self. It's not, it's not you coming down from the heavens. It is a redeemer. That's why I related to the Christos, to Sophia, to the Holy Spirit. It is the redeemer. It comes here to wake you up. Even if you want to look at it as true will, whatever your true will is, your guardian angel, your holy guardian angel should lead you down that path.
Mm-hmm. And then leave you when it's time to cross the abyss and all that stuff.
Oh, maybe. I've never crossed the abyss, so I couldn't tell you.
Yeah, you probably have. My opinion is based on my experience. And what I've experienced has been, I don't know. I mean, the higher I get, the less all this stuff really seems to matter. Do you know what I mean?
You mean the labels?
Yeah. So going back to the whole service thing, at the core of what I want with my magical activities. All right, so I've experienced that life is pretty cool most of the time, and that the things that aren't cool are easily adapted to or adjusted through occult means.
Okay.
I want to share that stuff with other people. And my holy guardian angel has been instrumental in making me understand how to communicate that effectively to other people, which was great. This whole concept of going back home. Can we go back home while we're still here in the flesh? Is I guess what I'm trying to get you to answer, Aaron.
Speaking strictly within the Gnostic philosophy here, I would say no.
No. Let's drop all the philosophies and just your opinion.
The thing is, you have to use a language, though. You can't really talk. It's hard enough to talk about.
You can tell me what you experienced. Just say it. Just say what you've experienced.
Have I experienced actually punching through the barrier of the fixed stars and being in the pleroma? No, absolutely not. Absolutely not, because the pleroma is static. There is no change. There is no change there. There's no change there. There's no movement there. Passions cannot go there. So no, you can't go there.
No, Yophiel. Like your experiences with Yophiel.
Yes.
Right.
What about?
I mean, specifically.
Okay.
The post eighth sphere stuff. Alright, is that different and unharmonized with your daily experience?
Well, Yophiel is on this side of the Great Barrier.
No, not that Yophiel, then. The one that actually is the guardian between the 8th and the 9th sphere. The one that takes you into the 8th sphere and propels you into the stuff beyond.
Well, for me, that would be the Holy Spirit or Sophia or the Christos. One or the other. They're all kind of the same.
But those experiences, are they that alien to what you've experienced here on this side of the celestial sphere? I mean, is it...
I have never experienced... unless you would count total mental silence meditation, which is probably the closest that a human being can get to that experience, because that is the experience of the pleroma, is 100% stillness. There's no passion at all. There's no movement in the pleroma, in that highest place. It's just the mind of God. It's just God is having thoughts, and in Gnosticism we call that the pleroma, the fullness. But when those thoughts manifest, they manifest here, and they become what we call reality. But no, there's no ritual, there's no exercise, there's no experience I've had that took me to that place, that completely dissociated, not part of nature place. Everything I've ever experienced, even when the angels have taken me right up into the highest heavens and shown me what it's like up there, it's still here. It's still in reality. It's still part of nature. They've never shown me anything that's not nature. In the courses of the stars, even what's in the highest, the seventh heaven itself, where the throne of God itself is supposedly situated, that's still on this side of that Great Barrier. So
you haven't gone past that.
I've never even tried. There's no point in it. There's nothing there. There's literally nothing. They call it the Ein in the Kabbalah. There's nothing there. There's no thing there that the human brain could even comprehend.
Are you kind of saying, Rufus, that you have experienced, or it is possible in terms of punching through that veil? Or can you just kind of share with the listeners about kind of how your apprehension is of the situation?
I don't know if I should, honestly.
Okay.
You know, there are things revealed at certain levels that can't be put into words, right? Yeah. But no, I think what Aaron's talking about with that silence, I try to put it into words because I'm a word guy. I really like to put things into words. But that stillness and that silence that he's referring to me, my experience with it was harmonizing. You know, that whole going home thing that he talked about, it sort of hit a nerve. And it's something that I think that people don't get about the whole modern occult tradition and what we're doing with all the conjuring of spirits and, you know, the whole Solomonic stuff and, you know, Goetia, whatever you're working with. You know, it's great to work on your personal life on this side of things, but what we are, I think, is something higher and more than we experience through our senses and our experiences and, you know, all the things that unfold. My experience when I conjured Yophiel to actually cross through the sphere of the fixed stars, it was something that was beyond words. You know, I mean, obviously, because there are no words beyond the eighth sphere. It's definitely that the hymns of silence is how it's expressed in the Hermetic corpus. It's a beautiful sensation that creates, I don't know how to put it, because, like, you know, in my daily life, I totally don't live up to it by any way, shape, or means. But it was one of the most powerful experiences in my life when I crossed through and had that moment of what Aaron's talking about, that silence, that aim, that nothingness, that no thingness. It's a beautiful moment. But at the same time, it harmonizes everything else down below, you know. And I think that getting back to this whole service thing, I didn't want to serve anybody, you know, or make anybody else's life better until I had actually punched through that barrier and experienced that brief moment of at oneness, you know. And at that moment, I actually learned compassion, I guess, you know, that service to others.
That's funny, because having performed Abramelin and called the guardian angel down from that same place, that fullness, the one lesson over all the years that I've worked with her, one thing she has driven into my head and one thing she is willing to kick my ass over again and again is compassion. They're really big on compassion for some reason.
Yeah, it's almost like they're parts of the same thing.
Right, and you get, well, what you're describing, you know, you call it, I don't know if you keep saying Yophiel. I'm not sure if that's who you mean, because Yophiel is the intelligence of Jupiter, but this entity that you're saying, you're calling from the eighth sphere, Pleroma, from beyond the fixed stars, that's the same thing that the guardian angel is. That's what the Christos, not Jesus, the Christos. That's what that is. That's what the Logos is. That's who Sophia is. And yeah, you call them down, and well, you mentioned the hymns of silence. You'll notice that I teach this in my Abramelin class, and people say, why is it just a plate of silver to scry into? There's no sigils, there's no god names. Where's all the Where's all the stuff that goes with it? Where's all the barbarous names? The book says you're not allowed to use barbarous names, and how is all this working without all these trappings? And I tell them, because you're dealing with that higher sphere, that place beyond reality, beyond time and space. So its sigils, it does have sigils. They're blank. And it does have divine names and barbarous names, and they're all silence. Because you're not dealing with anything in the elemental realm, nothing from Saturn all the way down to Hades. You're not dealing with that. You're dealing with something that you're trying to call here from that pure place of stillness. And yes, and for some reason, and it's not just you, I hear this again and again. Anyone who has done any work to call something down from the pleroma, from the fullness, they come down here and, number one, they get really pissed with what they find us doing down here. I mean, humanity in general. And they harp on compassion constantly. That's probably why Jesus harped on it so much, that the Holy Spirit, the dove, came down and bonded with him. The Logos, the Christos, he stopped being Jesus of Nazareth and became Jesus Christ, and went on and preached compassion, compassion, compassion. So that seems to be their overriding lesson that humanity has had a very, very hard time wrapping its brain around.
Yeah, because people are such shitheads.
I mean, for God's sake, there's a movement out there against Mr. Rogers. An actual movement that is anti-Mr. Rogers.
What? Are these like the flat Earth people who think that the Earth is flat?
No, they're generally the people who are angry at the participation trophy culture that kind of developed over, through the 90s, the 80s and 90s.
Yeah.
Everyone's equal and you're just fine the way you are and no one's ever a loser. And I can see where they're coming from because I hate that culture too. But they're dragging poor Mr. Rogers into it, and he didn't. People who created that culture were very into Mr. Rogers, and I think they kind of misinterpreted his message a lot. But he himself wasn't part of that. He pre-existed that, so they're blaming him for things that he had nothing to do with. But yes,
wow.
There's actually a movement against there's a documentary movie that just came out about him, and there's this whole movement of people trying to boycott the movie and everything else. Mr. Rogers.
What you're saying, Aaron, and Rufus, I don't want to take you out of context, when you're saying that people are generally shitheads, this idea of, really going on the attack against Mr. Rogers might be symptomatic of that.
Right, exactly. People are just... It's really hard to reconcile the fact that what you see above, the celestial sphere, that we're all, manifestations of the divine. It's really hard to reconcile that with your day-to-day life when you have to deal with somebody who's cutting you off on the interstate. That kind of thing. It's this recognition of the oneness of the whole human thing.
It can be very difficult if you have a job dealing with the public at all. If you work in retail, fast food, I work. I don't work there much anymore, but I used to work in a hotel, full time. And I tell you what, dealing with the public will suck all of your hope for humanity right out of you.
Right, and in Thelema, one of the things that we do in the OTO is we try to emphasize the fact that every man and every woman is a star. And treating every man and every woman as if they were a star is fucking difficult, I think that's what Aaron was trying to get to with this whole going home thing. I don't know, maybe not. I might be giving him too much credit. He might be, lower on the overall enlightenment scale than I am. I think we're all aiming for the same thing, is where we get to the point where, we recognize that the Trumpsters and the libtards are all kind of equally valuable, or that every human being, regardless of their opinion or their current state, is a beautiful entity. And getting to that point is extremely difficult. And I think that is what, this whole Holy Guardian Angel experience is all about, is getting to the point where you can look at a complete idiot on the side of the road who is high in crystal meth and still asking for money, and give them money, even though you know it's going to go for crystal meth or vodka or whatever. Recognizing that that's where they're at and that that's okay. That's where my holy guardian angel has been leading me. So
yeah.
I think that's where it leads all of us eventually, based on my experiences with my students. They all seem to eventually get to that point where they're like, oh my God, we're all part of the same thing and we're doing the same thing, which makes the whole cultural appropriation thing moot.
And to that point, talking about the HGA leading you places, this last question from Dean literally has this embedded in the question. Dean is asking for both of your perspectives on the following. Is it possible, Dean is asking, that your HGA will lead you to a life of celibacy? Be interested to hear both of your perspectives on that.
Not mine.
Not mine either.
Have you ever seen Alex, have you ever seen the movie Michael with John Travolta?
Yes.
Okay. That's what they're really like, and I'm not joking. You take an entity that has never had a physical body and let them mount you, let them ride in you. And you remember the story of the Watchers? Remember what happened when they came down and met women for the first time?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, these angels, they love sex, buddy. They friggin' love sex. Why do you think they were telling Dee and Kelly to share wives? I mean, these entities are not all this celibacy stuff. I mean, it's just nonsense.
Wow, that is
nonsense, man. And this is why I'm a Gnostic and not a Catholic, because I could never be part of a tradition that tried to cast sex as something that God hates or that is sinful or wrong or no. No, I had too much direct experience with the angels to know better than that.
Yeah, I think Nephilim is enough to prove your point there, Aaron.
I can hear the listeners already saying, well, wait a second. Isn't it possible that your HGA could lead you to do anything depending on the circumstances? And then other people will say, well, what about celibacy in terms of like temporary celibacy for purification and ritual? You can hear the listeners already.
Oh yeah, and anything's possible. You could meet your guardian angel, and your guardian angel could point you right to the Catholic priesthood. I mean, it just depends on what your path is. Let's say your biggest problem is an addiction to sex, and it's sex not just from pleasure, but sex because there's something missing inside of you, and you're constantly trying to fill it, and it's hurting you, and it's hurting other people around you. And your guardian angel, in fact, this is so funny. I was just contacted by a guy who told me that in his spiritual practice, he's been celibate for like almost a year now. And it's just because he's had such a bad interface with his sexual relationships, he needed to break it all off and work on himself first. And I really laud him for doing that, because, God, who does that, right? And then as far as abstinence for purification, absolutely. But not because there's anything dirty or wrong about sex. I always teach this to my students. And once again, this is something I learned from my ATR teacher. It's about hot versus cold. It's not about clean versus dirty. Not when it comes to sex. Sex heats you up. And if you look at the Solomonic purifications, every single thing about those purifications is intended to cool you down spiritually. Fasting, no meat, lots of prayer, lots of meditation, lots of bathing, and no sex. No gambling, no partying. You're supposed to be very calm and very cool by the time you get into the circle to interact with the spirits. Because if you're hot, then you are agitated, the atmosphere around you is agitated, and the spirits will not be able to interface with you as easy. Oh. So, yeah, but beyond that, outside of that practical use of abstinence, oh, hell, I would never take on a spiritual tradition that required my abstinence permanently. That, to me, that's just ridiculous.
Rufus, are you of the same approach that when it comes to outside of certain designated parameters, you're also finding celibacy probably not something that's recommended in the HGA sphere?
Yes, I'll just go with yes. I've never been inclined to be celibate by any of my spiritual interactions. Generally, when we do magic, the sexual override or overlap is, I don't know. I mean, I have not experienced a better or worse conjuration after having sex versus not having had sex. So I can't actually speak to that, I guess is what I'm saying. You know, I mean, when we do, actually, Aaron, I have a question for you about Mass. Nice segue there.
Oh yeah, Mass.
Mass. Like, so when we do Mass in Thelema, within the OTO context of the EGC, we do the Gnostic Mass. It's basically a public sex rite that is not sexual at all. In like the worst possible ways, in my opinion. I think that there should be at least some cunnilingus, but you know, nobody wants to hear me make changes to the Mass. Like when we do the Mass, it's supposed to be a sex rite, right? And if I have sex prior to going into the Mass with my priestess, who is going to be my priestess, the Mass is a lot more, I would want to say, juicy. You know, it's a lot more spiritually active. But when I go into a Mass after like having no sex for a while with the priestess that I'm participating with, it's not the same, and the tension is a little bit higher. And maybe that's just me because I haven't had sex in a while, but I don't know how that works. So when you do your masses, Aaron, your quote unquote masses, how are those impacted by your sexual activity?
First of all, I should point out that, you know, and students ask me this a lot when I talk about being cool to go into your rituals. The first response I always get is, well, what about sex magic? That's basically what you're saying. You know, you're doing this Mass. It is a sexual rite. And that's kind of a different thing. Like in my practice, I would be abstinent before the sexual rite, because that tension you're talking about is actually what I'm trying to generate. That's the energy we're trying to generate. And then you release it in the sexual rite, in the ritual. So when I say you have to be cool, that I'm not ruling out sex magic. So I totally see what you're saying. Now, as far as having sex before you go into Mass or not, now of course I'm not doing your kind of Gnostic Mass. I'm doing a more traditional Mass. It just happens to be Gnostic. It's not Thelemic. So we will actually me and Carrie will actually abstain before we go in and do that.
Weirdos.
But on the other hand, we have an altar to the Archangel Aniel, the Archangel of Venus. And this is basically my wife's altar. It's I'm sitting right next to it right now, actually. It's in our bedroom on a dresser. It's the biggest altar in the house because she is a high maintenance woman. Not my wife, Aniel. And and we have no problem with sexual activity right here, right next to this altar. In front of it, we'll walk up to the altar and work on it right after having sex, because in this case, that heat is good for this energy. That is acceptable here. That's what we're trying to go for. But if I'm going to go to, say, my guardian angel's altar or one of the other archangels, and now honestly from day to day I don't abstain. If I'm just doing candle rituals and offerings to the house, I'm not abstaining for that. I do those every day. I would never have sex. But if I'm doing an evocation, if I'm really opening the gates and I'm trying to call them right here into my presence, then yeah, I'm going to abstain from sex because I want to be as cool and calm as possible before I go into that environment.
Me and my partner generally, we work as like scryer and magician, you know? So like I do the conjurations and she does the scrying.
We do the same.
So I try to, you know, I've tried to actually document the differences between like when we've had sex in the last 24 hours prior to a conjuration versus when we haven't had sex for a while. And I don't actually see a lot of difference. You know, I mean, when it comes down to it, when when we've had sex the day of the actual conjuration, I feel more connected to my partner in a way that allows me to hear nuances, like in her voice when she's speaking the words of the spirits. You know, and it's like I feel more in touch with my partner in that ritual as a result of having just had physical intercourse, you know. But I don't know that that's necessarily. I don't know how this all works, you know. And I'm curious about what the sexual aspect of ritual really means. You know, I mean, I'm part of this whole Thelemic thing that's all about sex magic. You know, and you create a magical child when you have sex, right? It's like the core of our whole thing. But at the same time, I don't feel like Crowley really knew what he was talking about, and I don't feel like I really understand how it all works. So I'm curious about other magicians' experiences.
In that aspect of the thing, I don't know if I have much of an answer for you, really. You know, I've already told you the protocols that we follow. Have I noticed, like, if we've had sex within 24 hours that it's damaging to the ritual? No, I don't think I've noticed that. We just try not to go, you know, like we wouldn't have sex and then immediately go into a ritual unless it were a sexual ritual. Then we might, you know. And it also
right, and then it's all part
spirits
of
you're dealing with. Yeah, and it would also depend on the spirits you're dealing with, whether or not they care, and there's so many variables involved in it. But the main thing that I stress is that whether you're doing straight up sex magic or whether you are doing more of a traditionalist kind of, you know, abstaining and fasting and all that kind of stuff and being a nice good Christian for 7 days before you go in and evoke demons or archangels or whatever, that I stress that it's not about being clean or dirty. I mean, some of it is, you know, you're bathing to clean off sweat, and spirits don't like bad smells, so you've got to be clean to go in. But it's not about spiritual cleanliness. It's just about heat, being very agitated or being very calm. And I can say that the cooler I am going into a ritual, the better it is for me. And I can say that the times that I have done big rituals, like full evocations of archangels, where Carrie and I will abstain for like 7 full days. And let me tell you something, that's hard.
Yeah, I can imagine.
But I can say that the tension and the energy that builds, I mean, you go for 7 whole days just gritting your teeth and clenching your fists, and, you know, it's like there's nothing stopping us from going back into that bedroom, but we're just not going to. And that builds, and I have found very beneficial to the ritual itself.
Okay, so is that cold or hot?
Honestly, when you're in that moment, when you're just like dying and really that's very hot. But that's what the prayers and the meditation are supposed to be for. Even the Key of Solomon tells you when temptation comes on you during these periods of purification, it gives you prayers that you're saying. It's basically like mantras. You're just supposed to get your mind off of that and cool yourself back down. And if you do it right, you should be very cool by the time you go into the ritual rather than agitated and upset about it.
It's controlled energy, so it's like this is a horrible analogy, but I don't know why I'm thinking of French press right now. But like when you make French press, what? You know, this is what happens after almost 3 hours of really good conversation. Is you two get better and I get worse. That's how this goes. But
fine.
Well, but it's like French press coffee. You know, you boil the water. Well, the water is very energetically, you know, agitated. It's building and building and building, but it's controlled. And instead of the water just, you know, overflowing and burning everything, it's controlled and it's used in a way for an end result. Is it just kind of used like raising the energy, the temperature, so to speak, in certain things, but controlling it? Would that be fair?
You can look at it that way. I mean, that's definitely what it feels like as you're going through the process, because every time that temptation comes on you to break one of the taboos and you have to wrestle yourself back down, that is kind of a heated thing. But once you, and again, like I said, if you follow the procedures, and it takes time to get used to, you know, the first time you do this, well, you're probably going to screw it up. And little by little, you get better at it. So after a while, you get to where you can do this without spending the entire time going out of your mind because so many temptations keep coming to you. So you are ultimately going for that calmness, that coolness. But all that energy, every time you put those temptations back down inside of you, yeah, that is building in there. There is heat at the core in there. And when you go into that ritual, that's when you're supposed to release it. That's when you're supposed to inflame thyself with prayer. So you are literally taking all of this spiritual heat that normally you would expel on sex and fun and parties and all that stuff, diversion and entertainment, and you've held on to it and packed it into this little ball in the center of you, and then you go into that ritual and you release it like an orgasm. And that's where the real power, that real punch of power comes from.
Okay, so from the other side of things, when you're actually like partying regularly and you get drunk and you have a good time and you laugh and you joke with your friends and you're socializing regularly and you're having sex on a regular basis, and all right, so that was my life leading into a mass. Mm-hmm. And when I was in the actual mass, and I think that I had just had sex that morning prior to doing the mass, the priestly role that I was playing during that mass was completely different than masses when I went into it where I had abstained and observed all the things that you're talking about. The energetic difference, when you go into it completely relaxed and happy and satiated, I feel like the energies that I'm supposed to represent are unblocked and they can just go without my conscious direction, because I'm not trying to control anything as much as I am just trying to fulfill a role as a priest and being not a puppet necessarily, but the tool that is used by the spirit of the mass, versus when I have gone into it all pent up and super repressed. It's not as submissive, I guess, as it is when I'm not requiring anything out of it. You know what I mean? So the energies sort of flow through without any kind of blockages.
It does make some sense because the orgasm blasts through all of your, astral channels and everything within your aura. I've even heard that attempting astral travel is easier after an orgasm because your astral body is loose. It's been shaking. Yeah. But here's the question. Here's the question I have for you, though, because again, I point out that your mass is a sex rite. So right. The examples you've given me so far, and this is why I'm asking, have always been that you've had sex with the priestess before the mass.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, definitely.
Have you ever done that going into a mass where you've had sex with somebody else who's not that priestess?
No, not at all. No, I'm in a monogamous relationship, and we do mass together. So
okay, so and what the reason I'm asking that is because I have to wonder if you would feel that open connection you're talking about and how things are flowing and this connection you have with her, having just had sex with her earlier. I wonder if you would feel that if you had sex with another, or let's say Harper, but then another woman was standing in as priestess for some reason. So you've just had sex with her, and now this other woman who you've not had sex with comes in. I wonder if you would feel that open connection, that open flow of energy that you're talking about. I don't know. I don't know if it's just the orgasm that does that for you, or if it's that you specifically had sex with the woman who was going to play the priestess in the ritual.
No, I see. These are the kind of things that we actually talk about a lot in the OTO within priest and priestess groups, because this is the kind of thing that. There were priests who said you had to have sex with the priestess before you did a mass, back in the 90s, and that was basically an excuse for priests to get laid.
Right.
And so, that's creepy. We don't do that anymore, and if anybody ever experiences that, they should definitely report those people to the body master immediately. But, we within the actual spiritual context of the mass, I don't know. I mean, I've done masses without sex and masses with sex with my partner. and I just feel more comfortable and relaxed letting go after having had sex prior to doing the ritual. And if we on the occasions where we have not had sex, after the mass, there's a pretty intense sexual experience. I mean, as a result of that sexual energy that is built up in the mass.
Try going without for a week and see what kind of experience you have after that ritual.
We've done that, and it has been quite intense. It's been very illuminating, I will say. But I don't know. I don't know what kind of mass you do. It's obviously not sexual.
No. Like I said, ours is a traditional mass. It's the Gnostic cosmology and philosophy. Probably more Valentinian Gnostic than anything else. It's actually put together from several Orthodox masses, and you can go to an Orthodox church and see something very similar to what we do.
Wow. Were you ever ordained?
Oh, yes. You didn't know this?
No, I don't know anything about you.
Nemesis, and you don't know all the dirt on me? Yes.
I know.
Yes, I was ordained. I was ordained by Chick Cicero.
Oh, come on. That doesn't count.
It's a long Latin name, but it means the Church of the Blessed Mary of Angels. And I was ordained by Mr. Cicero.
And I think, Aaron, correct me if I'm wrong, but didn't you post a picture of your...
oh, yeah, my bull of ordination? Yeah, that's on my Facebook page. You can find it.
Okay.
You have a red chasuble to go over your white robe?
I do not, actually. I have the white robe, and I wear a white stole that goes over it.
Ah, okay. Weirdos.
And of course, my crucifix.
But wait a second, Rufus. Weirdos, what do you wear?
Me? Well,
it's a sex rite. They don't wear anything.
Yeah, exactly. Underneath the robe. Underneath the robes, we don't wear anything. No, I wear a white robe and a red chasuble that I actually got from some Italian Catholics. It's pretty cool.
That's
It
cool.
is the flame of the sun, and I've got a do-rag of maintenance. It's actually it's supposed to look sort of Egyptian, and you put a serpent crown over it. So it's all part of the thing.
That is awesome.
There are pictures of me online, actually garbed out in my priestly.
Actually, there's pictures. There's a picture of Carrie and I doing a wedding for a couple of our students, and yeah, you can see me in my full priest garb there.
Yeah, she looks really good in that.
She does.
Okay, gentlemen, so this has been a fascinating conversation, and as we wrap up here, I wanted to ask each of you, how can listeners best get in touch with you, or where would you like them to check you out online?
If somebody wants to actually talk to me about things, I'm on Facebook. By all means, feel free to try to reach me on Facebook, and if I have time, I will get back to you. If you check me out on Facebook, on Thursdays, I do a live broadcast, and it's basically my approach to hermetic promulgation. So,
okay,
if you want to see more about me, by all means, check me out on Facebook. I really am not good at the rest of the social media stuff.
No, Rufus, that is perfect. So, listeners out there, check out Rufus Opus on Facebook. And Aaron, I know listeners obviously can contact you on Facebook, but I believe Doc Solomon's Occult Curios is also a really good place to check out. Can you talk about that a little bit? DocSolomons.com. There's an S on the end of Solomons. DocSolomons.com. You can drop us a contact message there if you have questions about anything. And of course, that's where we have our services. We offer classes in Solomonic, Tarot, Abramelin, and more to come, by the way. And of course, we offer our products for tarot readings. So that's a good place. But if you just want to talk to me, ask me questions, I am actually professional, so I will actually talk to you. I may not have time to have full conversation.
Is what he's saying. No, but, I mean, by yes. Professional, he means you have to pay per minute.
That's $3.99 for the first minute. but no.
Oh
I mean,
God, it's 1992.
Kids, ask your parents. But I may not have a lot of time to have like very deep conversations. I mean, like we've been here for 3 hours, and I wouldn't have time to do that on Facebook. But I'm there and I'm active, and I also have the Solomonic group that I very closely moderate, so things stay on topic there. It's a good place to come and actually learn and see the both the scholarly and the practical side of my tradition. If you search for Aaron Leitch, a lot of my old writings are still on my old tripod page. That just shows you how old and decrepit I am. But that tripod page is still out there. And I also have my blog, which is one word, aaronleitch.wordpress.com. So I'm around. I'm not hard to find. If you want to find me, you'll find me.
God, you're such a dork.
Yeah, I know. I have no life.
Have you tried selling yourself on the internet? Oh, wait.
I have. .solomon.com.
As we wrap up here, gentlemen, is there anything else, either tips for listeners out there, any other information that you want people to know, anything else that you two want to say to each other that the FCC will let... Well, wait, we don't have to worry about the FCC, so you two go right ahead.
Aaron, you can have the first shot.
First shot. Oh, geez. God, we covered so much. What else could you add on to the end of this? I just say that the best takeaway from this is that regardless of what we were talking about, I think the biggest message was compassion, being open to one another and learning from one another, and not attacking each other for wanting to learn from one another. I mean, we can share ideas and talk shop without actually being harmful to one another's culture. I mean, that is still possible. So I think that's the big takeaway for me. Oh, and Rufus Opus kicks puppies.
Small puppies. But no, I would just like to say, I think Aaron and I have both started our practices by reading some really basic books and trying the experiments. Aaron has worked his way up through all of the different traditions that he's followed by actually doing the magic, and that's what I've done too. And if I can give any advice to anybody, it's just actually do the magic, do the experiment, see if it works for you, and apply it to your life, and don't give one another a hard time in the meantime, because until you get to a certain point where you can actually reach that compassion level, you don't really understand how hard it is for everybody else. And I guess kind of cut each other some slack, except Aaron. I think it's important to make sure that you don't give anybody too much grief, except Aaron. And that's a very important thing to do when you're working on this stuff, because you're a complete asshole, the same as everybody else. And we're just working on getting better and making the world a better place. And eventually we get to the compassion point, but in the meantime we can also get rich. So, do magic, it works.
Rufus Opus and Aaron Leitch, thank you both for coming on the podcast today, and look forward to having you both back on again soon.
Thanks for the invite.
Yep.
Listeners, as always, thank you so much for listening and supporting this and every episode of the Glitch Bottle podcast. That was, I'd have to say, one of the most in-depth yet wide-ranging conversations that I think we've ever had on the podcast, and I think it also took many interesting and unexpected directions. I really hope you enjoyed it, and I have to say, once again, thank you for taking the time to enjoy the podcast, and also for all the great listener questions. Definitely keep those coming. And also thank you for subscribing to the Glitch Bottle podcast. I have to say, I truly value your support, your input, your comments, feedback, and inspiration that you provide every single day to the podcast. Please make sure, if you'd like, to subscribe to Glitch Bottle on YouTube, youtube.com/glitchbottle. As well, please subscribe to Glitch Bottle on iTunes and on Spreaker.com. This episode is dedicated to you, the listener. That is literally you, wherever you are in your occult lairs, your summoning towers, or other locations of the esoterically awesome. Until next time, this is Alexander Eth reminding you to invoke often, uncork the uncommon, and keep the light.